we're going to go ahead and begin chapter 2 now of the book The Clay Marble by Mingfong Ho. Let's go ahead and begin chapter 2. The last rays of afternoon sun were filtering through the forest as we approached the border. Gradually the trees thinned out and the path widened. Several trails merged into ours. It seemed as if all the paths out of Cambodia were converging on this one spot on the Thai border. I could barely contain my excitement. I imagined mountains of rice lining the horizon and piles of tools and fish nets everywhere. Perhaps there would even be mounds of sweet moist coconut cakes and banana fritters. Hurry, I urged my brother. Yet as we finally emerged from the forest, all we could see was a vast, barren plain dotted with shrubs and scraggly trees, flat and desolate. Overgrown clumps of fireweed and red sorrel stuck out from patches of buffalo clover, and then even those gave way to the cracked, hard soil of paddy fields in the dry season. As we drove farther through the scrubland, though, I noticed that there were signs of life in the distance, of people and ox carts so far away that at first they looked like black specks. Saroon urged our oxen on, and soon we could see more evidence of human activity. The branches of the few trees around had been chopped bare for firewood. Mud holes had been dug for buffaloes to wallow in, and makeshift fences had been built around small vegetable gardens. We drove past these and approached the fringe of the refugee camp itself. It looked like an endless brown sea of thatched lean-tos, mingled with bright blue patches from clusters of plastic tents. Spirals of smoke from countless cooking fires broke up the vast flatness of the landscape. We passed women taking down laundry from lines, children spinning tops near the makeshift shelters, and quiet groups of people sitting around chatting. Why did it look so familiar and yet so unusual? And it suddenly struck me. Everyone was part of some family, not the cold-blooded Khmer Rouge version, the status family, but a living, laughing, loving family. I looked around in wonder. Even though many people seemed to be only fragments of a family, a frail grandmother with several young toddlers or a group of young boys clustered around a few old men, they were a family just the same. Like a patchwork blanket, I thought. The people here were survivors of families who had been ripped apart and then joined again. And everyone seemed to be busy doing something, not just sitting alone, silent and hollow-eyed with hunger, or organized into huge groups digging endless ditches. No, the people here were preoccupied with countless different chores of their own. I saw a sinewy old man splitting firewood, children lining up to draw buckets of water from a well, boys scrubbing their buffaloes in a shallow mud hole nearby, sisters combing each other's hair. And because it was getting close to dinner time, there were women cooking everywhere. I could smell rice steaming, salted fish sizzling in hot oil spiced with chili, peanuts roasting. I even thought I caught a whiff of coconut cakes. "It's like coming home," Mother said with quiet wonder. I knew exactly what she meant. Nong Chan was a strange place unlike anything we had ever seen before. A vast barren field teeming with refugees. But in the bustling quiet of dusk, it had the feel of our village during the years of peace before the fighting had started. When farmers would come in from the fields as their wives fanned the charcoal fires and their children bathed with fresh well water. Driving our ox cart, Saroon maneuvered the oxen through the scattered campsites until it became too crowded for the animals to move easily. He jumped down and led the oxen by the reins, threading his way carefully among the families. He headed for a well near a forked tree, where there was also a shallow creek in which buffaloes were wallowing. Several clusters of people were already settled there, with their thatched lean-tos and small fires, but nearby there was some empty space that no family had staked out for its own yet. "This looks like a good spot," Saroon said, turning to Mother. It's only going to get more crowded further in. Mother nodded, and together we got off the cart and started to unload our few belongings while Savoring unhitched the oxen. Poor things, you've both earned a rest, he murmured to them, patting the animals' thin flanks as he led them off to the water hole nearby. Mother looked around for a place to set down her kettle and sleeping mat. A girl spoke up. Put your things over here if you like. She was kneeling, stirring a pot of bubbling rice and smiling up at us. Mother set down the kettle she was holding, and I helped her put her sleeping mat beside it. Welcome to Nong Chan, the girl said. She looked about Saroon's age, 18 or 19, and had a broad face with high cheekbones. There was a bright checkered kerchief wrapped around her hair, and her eyes were friendly and curious. Where do you come from? She asked. Siem Reap, Mother answered. Really? The girl brightened. So do we. Our village is right next to the lake. Well, that makes us practically neighbors, Mother said, squatting down companionably beside the girl. How many of you have come over the border? There's 4 of us, my grandfather and my 2 little cousins, the girl said. And your parents? Dead, the girl said simply, as are my sisters and the parents of the cousins with us. She gave the pot of rice a quick stir. My grandmother and 3 brothers too. They're all dead. My husband died 4 years ago, and then my mother said. For a moment there was silence. I had heard enough of such conversations not to interrupt. First, there were the greetings, then the terse tally of the dead, and then the pause. Only after that, it seemed, could there be talk of other things. The girl fanned the cooking fire before dipping a twig into it. Let me help you get the fire started, she said. It's getting late and you must be very hungry. She extended the glowing twig to my mother. Mother looked at the twig, but made no move to accept it. There's really no need, she said awkwardly. We don't have any more rice to cook. I knew she wanted to say, except that she couldn't bring herself to admit it. Of course, the girl exclaimed. You don't have any firewood. How could you have gathered any? You just got here. Kindling is getting scarce, I can tell you. Most of the trees have been stripped bare. Even the roots have been dug up for firewood. Here. She shoved a bundle of kindling toward Mother. Use this for your fire. Mother bit her lips. No, she said almost curtly. You'll keep it. The girl frowned, and then her expression cleared. Grandpa says my tongue's quicker than a raging river, but my mind is as thick as mud. Using a tin cup, she scooped rice out of a gunny sack and stirred the grains into the pot already on the fire. It's a good thing I just started cooking, she said cheerfully. Won't have to start another pot. I'll just add some more water and we'll have enough for all of us. There. She looked up at me and my mother. You will join us for dinner, she said. It wasn't a question or even an invitation, but a simple statement. No, it's all right, my mother said stiffly. We're not hungry. The girl reached out and put her hand on Mother's arm. You don't understand, she said gently. It's different here. We have enough to eat. We have more than enough. There. She must have seen the tears brimming over in Mother's eyes, because she turned away and started to stir the rice vigorously. Before long, the girl had Mother peeling a clove of garlic and crushing dried red peppers. I could tell that my mother was enjoying cooking again, now that there was seasoning and even some salted dried fish to work with. Next, the girl turned her attention to me. I'm going to bathe while the rice is cooking, she said. Want to come along, little sister? I hesitated. Not shy, are you? My name's Nia. What's yours? Dara. Well, come on, Dara. I've got a bucket of clean well water here we could share. There was nothing I would have liked more than to douse myself with cool water just then, but I could see no hedge, no mud brick wall, not even a line of laundry to bathe behind. Nia must have sensed my shyness, because she laughed as she tugged at me. You've got to do everything out in the open here, she said cheerfully. Come on, it's easy once you get used to it. I followed Nia as she carried her pail of water to a massive beam of solid stone half sunken in the fields. My grandfather says that it might have been the crossbeam over the gateway of an ancient temple during the Angkor Empire, Nia said, pointing to that stone. If so, it'd be almost 1,000 years old. I looked at the stone beam curiously. Chiseled on it were some world markings, worn smooth with time. On one corner of it was a carving of what must have been an aspara, a dancing angel. But all that remained now was a delicate hand, its stone fingers arched gracefully back as if in the middle of a dance. Gently I touched one fingertip and felt as if I had reached across 1,000 years. How did it get here? I asked. Grandpa Kim isn't sure. Maybe it was the spoils of a war, taken from some famous faraway temple like Angkor, or maybe there were some small ruins nearby that nobody even knows about. Then, without even looking around, Nia hitched her sarong up to her breast and deftly stripped off her shirt. Scooping some water out of her bucket with a dipper, she splashed the water over her bare shoulders. Come on, she called, sprinkling some on me. How wonderfully cool the drops of water felt. Clumsily, I wrapped my sarong around my chest, too. Just as well I'm still flat-chested, I thought, as I wriggled out of my shirt. Together, taking turns with the dipper, we bathed out in the open. I scooped ladle after ladle of water over myself, feeling the cold seeping through the scalp and down my shoulders. After those long, dusty days in the creaky ox cart, it felt so refreshing that I laughed out loud, and Nia laughed along with me. When we used up all the water, we walked back toward the carts, swinging the empty pail between us. As we approached the cooking fire, Mother looked up at us and smiled. I felt as if someone had suddenly reached inside me and squeezed my heart. So strong and happy was my mother's smile, I couldn't remember when I'd last seen her smile like that. Dinner's ready, Mother announced, pointing to a dish of salted fish stir-fried in garlic, and the pot of steaming rice. I hope I didn't make it too spicy. I started to head for the food, but felt Nia tugging at the pail. Come on, she was saying nervously. Let's go get some dry clothes. Only then did I notice that my brother was nearby and staring open-mouthed at us. Not at me, I realized, just at Nia. I looked at my new friend. Beads of water glistened on her bare shoulders, and her wet sarong clung to her. I felt annoyed at my brother for staring like that, but one look at him, and I relented. All those years Savoring had spent digging ditches, I thought he'd probably never seen a girl as lovely as Nia, or as wet. By the time I had changed into dry clothes, I joined my mother and brother by the cooking fire. An old man and 2 children were also sitting there. Mother edged closer to Savoring to make room for me, so that the 3 of us formed a semicircle around the flames. Nia started ladling out the rice, and as she did so, she introduced the old man next to her, a tall, gruff man with thick eyebrows. This is Bo Kim, my grandfather, she said. I nodded at him shyly. What do you say? Mother prompted me. Grandpa Kim, I said obediently, and Mother nodded her approval. On the other side, Nia explained, were her 2 cousins. One was a girl about my age, and the other was a plump baby. I barely nodded to each of them before turning my attention to the rice. Nia handed the first plateful to her grandfather, who took it without comment. She passed the next plate to my mother, who hesitated, then thanked her softly. Savoring was next. When Nia stretched out her hands to offer him a plate, he would not take it. Savoring, come on, I whispered. He pretended not to hear me and kept stoking the fire, sending a few sparks spinning up into the air. Torn between his hunger and his pride, Savoring couldn't seem to decide whether to accept or refuse Nia's offering. Please eat something, brother, Nia said softly, smiling at him across the fire. It has been a long, hard trip, and you need to keep your strength up. He looked up at her, and finally he held out his hands and accepted the plate of rice from her. My turn was next, and I almost snatched the plate from Nia. The fragrance of the long-grained rice was wonderful. Steamy and sweet and warm, it wafted up to me. I had not seen such a generous amount of white rice for so long time. I lifted a spoonful of rice and ate it. I thought about what a wonderful thing it is to eat rice. First, you let the smell drift up into lazy spirals, sweet and elusive. Then you look at the color of it, softer and whiter than the surrounding steam. Carefully, you put a spoonful of it in your mouth and feel each grain separate on your tongue, firm and warm. Then you taste it, the rich yet delicate sweetness of it. How different it was from that gritty red rice we'd been rationed to for the last 3 years. Gruel, so bland and watery that it slipped right down your throat before you could even taste it. No, this was real rice, whole, moist grains I could chew and savor. I thought I was slowly relishing each mouthful, but before I knew it, my plate was empty. My mother had already started her second plateful, and Saroon was finishing off his third. None of my family had even bothered to try the fish and garlic sauce. We were enjoying the plain rice so much. I wondered if we were being too greedy, but Nia had noticed my empty plate and was already reaching over to ladle more rice on it. "What about you?" Mother asked, glancing at the rest of Nia's family. "Will there be enough?" "There's more than enough," Nia smiled. "That's what makes the rice taste so sweet here, don't you think?" Nobody else said anything much, and soon we were all done eating. Mother went off with Nia's young cousin to rinse off the plates at the well, while Saroon stayed by the fire to talk to Nia and her grandfather. I strolled back to our ox cart and shook out my sleeping mat. Ever since we'd set out on this trip, I had slept under the broad wooden planks of the cart, in the unfamiliar darkness of the forest. It had been comforting to have those planks as a shelter, but I hesitated now, standing with my mat between the cart wheels. Close by, the cooking fire was burning low, and a few sparks still whirled away in the night sky. Elsewhere, a boy was whittling a stick of firewood, and a baby was whimpering as its mother crooned to it. On an impulse, I decided that I wanted to sleep under the open sky, so I spread my mat alongside the cart and stretched out on it. The stars were just beginning to shine, and a cool evening breeze stirred the still air. In the distance, I heard a mother singing a lullaby. It had a familiar melody, one that I could remember my mother singing to me a long time ago. The pulsing hum of night sounds, of crickets, of cicadas, settled over me like a light blanket. As I shut my eyes, I took a deep breath. I had the strange feeling that somehow I had finally come back home. And that is the end of chapter 2. We will pick up with chapter 3 tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying this book.